So we're moving on. I am delighted to welcome our next speaker. I've seen Anna speak before, and she's is a great speaker and very passionate, along with all the other speakers that we've had. So Anna Felländer is going to talk to us about AI, an enabler or disenabler for achieving SDGs. As it says on the slide, Anna is founder and president. She can correct me if I get this wrong. Anch AI, and please do, Anna, correct me if I've got this wrong. And Anna is one of Sweden's leading experts on the effects of digitalization on organizations, society, and economy. I'm looking forward to this. Anna, over to you.
Thank you. So I am Anna Felländer, founder of Anch AI. I am super thrilled to be here. You hear my voice, and that's good enough. I want to talk about how to release the true value of AI, actually by ethical AI governance. So next slide, please. So innovations humans can trust. So my goal is that this symbol, Anch AI, will be an ethical filter on all AI solutions going forward in the future. But let us go back a bit. Before I was the chief economist at Swedbank, that's Sweden's largest retail bank, I spent 10 years doing macroeconomic forecasting and scenario analysis at the Ministry of Finance and the Prime Minister's office during the financial crisis. And there I got fascinated by what could not be measured and what was happening under the surface. So as the chief economist at Swedbank, I did research and implemented tools for measuring the positive externalities from digitalization that was happening under the surface. And I did productivity measures on the consumer surplus and the willingness to pay. But in 2016, when data-driven technologies and AI emerged, I recognized a shift. So from these positive externalities that I get more out of it than I'm actually paying, to the opposite. So I opt in, I give away my data, and I do get a lot of efficiency and speed, but I also get digital pollution out of that. So I got an affiliation at the Royal Institute of Technology, and I initiated my multidisciplinary research group, and we created an ethical risk assessment methodology. And the beauty of it was that the approach was unique. We said, let us categorize these dark cloud of digital pollution, and let us see what the root causes are in an organization. So what we did is that we got funding from the Swedish state, Vinnova. So we tested and vetted this methodology in a sandbox environment with policy regulators, academics, multidisciplinary, private public sector, startup, civil society. And 2018, I founded Anch AI. And now this is the framework with its 200 questionnaires in different surveys are now launched at a platform for screening, assessing, mitigating, reporting, and auditing AI ethical performance. Next slide, please. Yet, during my time at the Royal Institute of Technology, we wanted to explore if there were research evidence that could prove if artificial intelligence was an enabler or a disenabler for achieving the SDGs. So what we did, there are 17 SDG goals, there are 169 targets. And let's talk about these 70 goals and 169 targets they are divided into society, economy, and environment. So what we found was 79% of the 169 targets, 134 targets was proven being an enabler for achieving the SDGs. 59 targets was proven to be a disenabler. So when it comes to these three buckets of society, economy, and environment, for example, AI as an enabler, that would be society number one, goal number one, no poverty, and goal number four, education, equality education. When it comes to the economy, what would be an enabler was shown number 8, decent work and economic growth. This is no surprise that AI would, we talked about the general purpose technology, of course it would be and spurring productivity and economic growth. And then we would have, for example, in the environment, that would be the goal of life on life, where we act on land, where we actually can, through AI, make more or better decisions on how to reduce carbon dioxide footprints and to be more efficient and reduce all spill along the value chain. So we can see that AI for sustainability is a fantastic way to save the world. Yet, if you want to go, because I have a fantastic, beautiful slide on the result of the research where you actually can show, where you can see the balance on every 169 targets, whether it's an enabler or a disenabler. Anyway, going to the dark side of the targets that would be a disenabler of achieving the goals. There are, for example, inequalities that would lead to hampering growth. We know that it will be very capital biased, hence the productivity growth. Yet what we, now I'm shifting, because I encourage you all to read this research that was published in Nature Communications, and we got a lot of attention, but my part of the research here was to look at them as a macroeconomist at the economy part of the three sectors of the goals. And going back then to the multidisciplinary research, we saw that as AI adoption in organizations accelerates and should be embraced by all organizations in order to be relevant, the technology poses ungoverned risks. So we see that this dark cloud of pollution, we categorize that in privacy intrusion, discrimination, lost autonomy, disinformation, social exclusion, and harm to safety. We see that those categories of risks, they were actually happening unintentionally across sectors and industry. So, for example, the UK government, you would all know about the recent charge of cheaters in language test for newly arrived, amplifying bias. There's also in financial services, historical patterns rejecting female credit, even though they have the same financial situation as a man who would get accepted due to the historic patterns. Same goes with recruitment, and also facial recognitions that are let loose with no oversight. So the root causes within an organization we categorize to 4: immature data and AI. That would be when the AI hasn't been trained enough. So for example, in the Starbucks example, where the AI nudged 6,000 calories on a young cohort because the algorithm learned without oversight and transparency that the profit margins were higher on sugar products than on coffee. So immature AI and data. It could also be that the data set is insufficient, which creates bias as well. And then we have data bias, where the data is not reflecting the reality or the preferred reality. And then we have the bias of the creator, where the coder actually has no skill set on how to code the ethical principles of the organization, or doesn't know or grasp how it could be scaled and be discriminating. Then we have misuse and overuse of AI, and this could be when, for example, a drone, I've heard you talk about this, could be exploring a good cause of the attack of insects on nature, but instead it could be used to explore whether there will be burglary opportunities in houses in the forest, for example. Next slide, please. So we all know that AI is self-scaling, self-learning with low explainability and transparency. Yet what we found is that the root cause is often due to that AI operates in organizational silos without an integrated ethical, a business and legal perspective integrated. So for example, there are critical business decisions that are taken in a tech silo. So if you would have an AI with a fairness tool in the tech silo saying, let us have there's a trade-off between fairness and accuracy, and we would have the discriminatory groups with the gender, and they would make the decision unaware of what discrimination law would apply to that specific fairness metrics. Also, that decision would be made without knowing the business area knowledge about the context of where the solution is used or misused. Next slide, please. So by doing orchestration between these 3 silos, the business team, the legal team, and the tech team, our platform managed to align and visualize these critical decisions. For example, how smart can a car or a house or a city become without being privacy intrusive? When does a recommendation engine do unethical nudging? So how do you make sure that existing and the upcoming that we talked about earlier as well, the upcoming regulation on AI, and the organization's specific ethical considerations or ethical principles and values are translated and integrated into code and data? So that's how we started this risk assessment methodology on ethical AI governance. And the beauty is that we've collected a lot of data, both from the years we spent in sandbox environment, but also we worked as a semi-research hub and semi-consultant agency with some of the phases of the platform digitalized. So we would start by having these 200 questions that were tagged to maybe 15 different features, like where you are in your AI life cycle, what is the vulnerability in the requirements, what's the root causes, who in an organization would be accountable for that, and what is the risk exposure, and how could you mitigate it. And the way that we developed our own fairness tools, we said, okay, there are tech teams out there doing their best to do the required explainability for the tech silo. They do the interpretability and the traceability and the monitoring of it, and they do the data bias filter, and they do the fairness model, and they actually visualize the trade-off. But the problem is that they do it in a silo, and it's not translated and communicated and aligned with the legal team and or the business team. So next slide, please. So working with all these organizations along since 2016, what we see now is that the expected AI regulation will require massive reporting. And the way the high risks AI has to be assessed is either it could be a really administrative burden, or it could be a way to release the real true power of AI. If you go to the next slide, please. So the regulatory risks in the upcoming EU regulation, that you could, take a pill and do a quickie fix, but in the long or in the medium in the medium time, or actually today, you can be complying to these ethical to this regulation, but still have your unique business risks. So say that you are in financial industry, there you're going to be regulated, but then a chatbot is not regulated. But we know that a chatbot can be discriminatory in a couple of minutes. We've seen that. But the framework goes beyond this regulatory compliance. With that said, it's not the red tape it's not a red tape on the tech silo. It's the other way around. It creates an ethical filter so we can do it in the pace we want, because Margareta Verstager, she said, well, we're going to compete against China and US with AI innovations that are keeping European citizens human rights. But once you detected the regulatory risks and the unregulatory risks, this is where you can truly create the competitive market positions that will be your edge going forward. As social concern is increasing, there is a wide concern on C-level executives that they know about 80% they know that they have to regulate and control for AI risks. They're concerned and they want to do something about it. Yet there's only around 10% of their customers in the survey that believe that they actually can take accountability for this. So as this regulation is getting more and more around the corner, the social concern is increasing and will make the opt-in to the organizations that are truly responsible and take accountability for how their organization is using their clients and the citizens' data on their preference and behavior in a responsible manner. Next slide, please. So we talked about a lot of sandbox today. We talked about the standards, and the reason we can call this platform a GitHub for AI governance is we have truly founded a risk assessment methodology. You can read that on our webpage as well. That is actually helping organizations to be able to comply to upcoming EU regulations, but also to create a governance structure that creates a frictionless highway for responsible and trustworthy AI. So the alignment, the cross-organizational alignment that we started to realize in the beginning, that this was the problem, that there were different languages. So the full control of AI risk will be a risk key indicators to all audit board committees going forward. So it's not only upcoming EU regulation, it is the ESG, it's taxonomy, it's all type of updated social responsibility. But also, as I said, market acceptance for your AI. But the speed and efficiency is actually really critical, because the way that organizations are operating in silos make the audit firms go in and have maybe 8 weeks of audits. So this is actually creating speed and efficiency. Next slide, please. This next slide, please. Okay, so the platform actually screens and assesses for AI risks. I'm going to end here because you have to create your organizational orchestration here. I'm going to end, and I'm going to give you some key takeaways here. And the key takeaways are that AI is now ungoverned. Even though there are AI for sustainability, it is not the same as sustainable AI, because you could have an AI that would help women and children in crisis, war conflicts, to help them to get to comfort and shelter. Yet the solution could actually be misused by the other side of the war, that could actually misuse the data and get them even into war situations. So we need to embrace all AI that would lead to achieving the SDGs, but AI for sustainability is not the same as sustainable AI. So for sustainable business models, every AI needs an ethical filter. So EU regulation is just around the corner, and we need to get ready with cross-functional governance in order to have this EU regulation actually as an enabler and accelerator for responsible AI. Thank you.
Anna, thank you so much. I'm so glad we managed to connect. A bit of a canter through a really fascinating topic, but thank you so much for connecting, and we'll try and pick up again offline.